Donald Trump believes, in after this meeting at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump, one of the points that he has mentioned was Europe will take a significant share of Ukraine's security responsibilities with the US support. Do you think that Europe is there? Europe, do they really want to have a better understanding, as Donald Trump is, somehow suggesting?
Well, I mean, this is, all of this is why it's so opaque and why I think Trump has deliberately left it in this opaque state because it's all a chicken and egg. Because, yes, the Europeans want to be, if there's a ceasefire, they want to be on the other side of the ceasefire facing the Russians, and they want their forces, NATO forces, to be there. But they won't do it and can't do it without a guarantee from America that if they get into trouble, then America will come in and support them unquestioningly. And of course, America is not wanting to do that. And Trump probably refused that if it was asked of him. And in any case, when they blithely talk in Europe, of security guarantees on the Article 5 format, that this would be what is necessary. I mean, to do that, for America to take on that responsibility, would be, first of all, very polarizing within the United States. Um, to commit, I mean, yes, people say, oh, well, he did an executive order giving sort of security guarantees to Qatar. I mean, yeah, but this is a completely different issue. I mean, Qatar is a tiny little dot on the map. I mean, this would be giving security guarantees of willingness to go to war against Russia. This is a different order, and there's no appetite in it, apart from a few figures like Lindsey Graham. But there's no real appetite for going to war with Russia, particularly amongst his base, the MAGA forces. They are not. They're not already keen on that at all. They don't want any more foreign wars. Foreign wars are anathema to them. And this is the whole principle behind America First. So I think that, when he says it's up to you, I mean, he knows he's making an invitation that can't be accepted. Come to my party, but oh, it happened yesterday. I'm so sorry you couldn't make it. But I mean, they're not going to get the guarantees that they were looking for, because America is not going to backstop it. And even if Trump thought it was a good idea, which he doesn't, it would probably require to pass through the Senate. That sort of guarantee of a sort of Article 5 support for the Europeans and the Ukrainians against Russia would need Senate approval, which again is not in prospect.
Do we have any understanding of what sort of guarantees, security guarantees, are acceptable for the Russian government or the Russian side of the argument and
Oh
agreement?
yes, yeah, yes. From the Russian perspective, I mean, security guarantees were discussed in that meeting in Istanbul in 2022, and the Russians proposed security guarantees. But their idea of I mean, first of all, their idea of security guarantees is different from the European one. The Russian view is that what really needs to be for security is to address the fundamental lacuna, if you like, which is of the forward advance of NATO right up to their borders, from the period of the reunification of Germany's right up to the borders of Ukraine, and also the lack now of any agreements on things like intermediate missile deployments into Europe. So, I mean, how they see, security guarantees are sort of big picture, not just about whether there's going to be, a few battalions of French and Britain on the other side of a ceasefire line. That's not a security guarantee for Russia in any real understanding of it. What they want is the security architecture of Europe to be addressed. And in 21, they proposed a draft treaty on those lines. And it was completely ignored by Europe and by the United States. But that's what they mean by security guarantees. And they did suggest then that there should be other states should be able to deploy to Ukraine if necessary to provide some sort of security guarantee to Ukraine, but these would not be NATO troops. So they suggested that they could be drawn from other. They suggested perhaps Indian troops or other troops would be available to, if you like, provide some sort of security elements. And they said, that they also would like security guarantee for them. They would like Europe to declare clearly and in a legal way that they have no intention of attacking Russia. It's all now inverted to, oh, we must protect against Russia attacking Europe. Well, actually, I was in Moscow earlier last month, and everyone is acutely aware of all these threats coming out of Europe. War with Russia, from the German defense minister, from the French head of the army, from generals in Britain saying, well, if there isn't war by 2028, it could be next year we're going to war against Russia. So the Russians want, something, a little broader and in understanding than simply, if there's going to be, a few hundred British and French and Germans sitting in the Ukrainian territories after some sort of agreement. They want something that is a proper, and what is more, they don't want the deal. They want a legally formulated treaty with the United States and with NATO, which spells it out very clearly, that it's tacked down and isn't just some sort of said on the fly. Because this is the great puzzle of this whole proposal. The main people negotiating this on behalf of the United States, one is Trump's son-in-law, and another is a friend of his from the real estate building industry. But neither of them, I think maybe Witkoff is a member of the administration, but I don't think Kushner is. But neither of them have a mandate on behalf of the United States to negotiate with another state. The sense that would fall to Rubio, who's Secretary of State, who hasn't been a party to these talks, perhaps because he's not so much in favor of them. But if you're going to have a formal agreement, you've got to have, someone who's mandated to put it down on paper and then to sign it on behalf of either Europe or the United States. Europe is not going to be a part of this negotiation, but they will be are still part of NATO, of course. So this is going to be much, it's a question of confidence and trust. Because what happens if you have a nice talk with Steve Witkoff and with Kushner, and they suggest a deal. But what happens next year or the year after when someone says to Putin, what deal are you talking about, Mr. Putin? Do you have this in writing somewhere? And he'll have to say, no, we don't. It was just a verbal agreement between two people who are friends of Mr. Trump. That's not really enough for state-to-state relations, state-to-state business, where it matters, wording, the exact, what is written matters a lot. not just someone saying, "Oh yeah, we can do this. Don't worry, we'll do this." I promise you, it will. NATO won't advance any further. Of course not. We don't intend to do that. And he had a great example of that. Putin did with when he met with Biden in Geneva. It was some time ago, and they had a talk about Ukraine then. And Putin said to Biden, "Do you intend to put missiles into Ukraine?" Biden said no. But then the next day, Lavrov was told by Blinken, yes, we intend to put missiles into Ukraine, and we're not prepared to discuss that principle. We're only prepared perhaps to talk about the numbers of missiles that we will put into to Ukraine. Well, the flight time for a Tomahawk from Ukraine to Moscow is about 2 minutes. It's it's just not acceptable to have that sort of. So security is bigger security, and not just about having a few troops on the other side of the whatever is the frontier between the five states, the five oblasts, and the Ukrainian lands that remain.
I think one of the main issues right now, as the Russian part is talking about, is if there is any sort of agreement or settlement in Ukraine, the Congress in the United States should be part of it, because you remember with JCPOA, the
Mm.
agreement between Iran and the United States, 5+1.
Mm.
The Congress was not part of the deal. That's why the new president Donald Trump came in, just he demolished everything, destroyed everything. But right now Russia doesn't want to get into the same trap that Iran has experienced before. Do you think that the Congress would be part of this, or they're willing to do that?
Well, this is precisely why I'm saying, that, they actually, Russia demands a proper legal approach to any resolution in Ukraine, one that is written down, that has legal force in international law, and they will not accept just something that can be overturned tomorrow, or if Trump changes his mind or something in the next days. No, they have to have, and they've already experienced him changing his mind several times over this period. So yes, they would need that, and no, Congress would not agree, because Congress, there are significant elements in both houses that are opposed to normalization with Russia. Again, this is part of the deep architecture of foreign policy that is present in the permanent state of America. They have certain rules and they have certain elements, which is why what made them so opposed to Trump in the first place. He wasn't abiding; he was the wild card. They had elections primed and ready, whereby it was Hobson's choice. You could choose the Democratic president candidate or the Republican candidate, but actually, ultimately, it wouldn't matter much, because both of them had the same. Yes, there'll be a slight ideological leaning one way or the other way, but both of them on the deep architecture had a common approach. So it was, if you like, a mirage of choice, because there wasn't a real choice. The fundamental elements of American policy was not up in those elections. It was, you choose one or the other. And then Trump came along, if you like, as a wild card, and they had sort of massive gatherings to stop Trump. The leaders of both wings of the Uni party had meetings on sort of islands to try and stop it. So no, it wouldn't be easy to get an agreement through Congress.
Yeah. Let me shift the gear, Alistair, a little bit to
Mm.
talk about what's going on with the case of Netanyahu going to the United States. And Donald Trump was asked when he stayed right next to Netanyahu. He was at one of the reporters asked him, "Will you allow Israel to attack Iran if they continue with with its ballistic missile program or nuclear program?" Donald Trump, the response was somehow fascinating. He said, "If they continue with ballistic missile, yes. Nuclear, fast." What is that, and what is your understanding on the situation and the way that Donald Trump wants to deal with the case of Netanyahu, Israel, and Iran?
I think there are several layers to this, and I think it's we can be too superficial. But I mean, the first thing I would say is, from out of that meeting came a lot of language and rhetoric, but little of any systemic structures. Nothing was defined, as far as we know, about the next stage in Gaza, phase two in Gaza, or any of these elements. And the language that, these are familiar sort of bluster used by Trump, who's sort of ducking and weaving about wording and things like this, and he says these things. I mean, I know. I mean, Iran has to take this language at face value and seriously, but this, oh, I'm going to knock the hell out of Iran, or if Hamas don't disarm, I mean, it'll open the gates of hell. I mean, we've heard this many times now on all of these things, and it's standard sort of Trump speak, but doesn't necessarily mean that. In fact, I think there's lots of reasons for thinking that this was directed in other areas as well. And then we can come back to why Netanyahu was at the meeting. But the first stage, I would say, to understand this is really, it's about the domestic position of MAGA, which is the people who support America first and are called if you like, the isolationists in derogatory terms, because they don't want foreign wars, and that's called isolationism in the United States. And as you know, there has been a large element of MAGA, and it has been crystallized in what happened with Charlie Kirk, who was killed, who was the head of this organization called TPUSA, True Promise United States. And at this recent meeting of the TPUSA, and this is a large organization, important one, because it brings in lots of young Republicans and from other, if you like, more populist elements. And the whole question is about what is America's foreign policy. It seems to be a foreign policy of unqualified support for Israel. And these young people say, why should it be for Israel? We are America firsters, not Israel firsters. And what is this? And so there were very heated discussions going on about this. And now we see if you like, the Jewish and Israeli supporters in America are trying to, if you like, damage this group, the MAGA group, by saying that there is no, you have, and they say this towards Vice President Vance too. No, it's not good enough for you to say it's all right to criticize the policy of Israel, and to say that makes that isn't an anti-Semitic position to take. They say it is anti-Semitic position. You have to support Israel 100%. But this is a wedge that, if you like, the old guard are trying to stick in because they don't like MAGA. They don't like this organic popular movement rising in America that threatens the old established, largely, managed, controlled politics of both Democrats and Republicans, and they would like to take control back. And so they are challenging, if you like, the MAGA, that they're anti-Semitic, and calling them anti-Semites. And so I think one of the things that Trump was doing was just saying, in supporting Israel, it was necessary for, if you like, the vice president, people like Vance, because he's the heir presumptive to this MAGA constituency. And he's always been very clear and saying, yes, we must support Israel, but we do have differences with Israel, and we can have differences on policy. Sometimes we can agree, sometimes we can't. So I think you have to first of all see his sort of statements that were very pro-Israel, and they were at this meeting at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, and particularly towards Netanyahu. I think this is one layer that you have to see it. This is the preparation for midterms. The midterms, if you like, the old guard would like to see them lost, if you like, that Trump loses the midterms. And then they will have a sort of acceptable candidate will come into this. So they want to weaken the MAGA forces. And Trump, I think, is saying these things that, we have to support. And he also criticized, and his team criticized Israel about Gaza, and certainly about what's happening and they were very critical about the new settlements coming in the West Bank, and they criticized Israel in terms of continuing to bomb Lebanon and continuing to mount military operations in Syria. So they are trying to sort of balance and prepare how not to lose the midterms to a volatile and an increasingly independent, organic, now without a leadership. I mean, there are leaders, but influencers, perhaps, rather than leaders of this group. But this was a part of, I think, the sort of unseen part was the sense of needing to prepare for the coming war. The Speaker of the House has said, whatever happens in the coming years, America and the Republicans are going to have a deep argument about the nature of foreign policy. And so this was, I think, partly geared to that sort of coming discussion about foreign policy, and particularly about Trump's base, the MAGA base. Yes, it's possible to criticize Israel, at the same time supporting Israel is probably the compromise, because some of that MAGA base say there should be no support for Israel, the money should be removed from Israel, and there should be nothing that support. But the compromise that Vance and others who aspire to, use this for election purposes needs a compromise, and that's the compromise that is being, if you like, being pushed at the moment against the forces that are trying to say, no, you're all anti-Semites. If you don't support Israel unconditionally, you're an anti-Semite. So that's, I think, one layer of this process. The other layer is what was Netanyahu doing? Why did he go? And I mean, it's obvious to say, you cannot, it would be very easy to say, well, he went there simply because he wants a green light to attack Iran. And he did ask for that. But I think you have to understand it more deeply. The first question that was asked by one of Netanyahu's own companions at that meeting was, will Netanyahu get a pardon? What are you going to do to give him a pardon? As your viewers will know, I mean, there are criminal charges against Netanyahu. There are two layers to those criminal charges. One layer of criminal charges is an old one, but legal opinion in much of Israel is that if pursued, Netanyahu will be convicted and therefore would probably have to go to prison. But then now, and this is the other aspect of it, now there is something much worse, which is what's called Gate. That is that the state of Qatar was paying at least three people in Netanyahu's office, was giving them money regularly in his office. And the question is, did he know about it? If so, what was it for? If he didn't know about it, well, then he should have known about it and he should resign. But it's becoming very bitter and powerful because people are talking about treachery now. Serious people like former defense minister Yuri Bagon and others are saying that this needs to be investigated. And so Netanyahu, he doesn't even want a pardon, he wants the whole case, all the cases against him, just eliminated. And so there's a lot of pressure, and Trump was talking about that sort of pressure that was being put on the Israeli president to give him, if not a pardon, then an end to the trials, end to the legal process, which is probably not legally possible in Israel. But the pressures on Netanyahu are really, what I'm trying to say is, are really growing and increasing, particularly as Israelis have come to the conclusion that actually what they see is there is a sort of patchwork of ceasefires or not ceasefires, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Lebanon, whether it's in Yemen, whether it's in, if you like, further south, or across the whole region in Gaza and in the West Bank. You know, there's this patchwork of ceasefires, but none of them actually have, and they're mostly coerced ceasefires, but none of them have brought a complete completion. They've not brought a victory, a complete victory for Israel. Far from it. Yes, there are these ceasefires, but the movements are still intact. Hezbollah is intact. So is Hamas is intact. So are other movements, resistance movements, intact. And Syria is becoming more and more a problem and not a part of a solution. So Netanyahu, I think, is looking for how do you, if you're stuck in all of these and the walls, none of them are providing you, he needs to go to election this coming year, 26. He needs to go to election. And he needs to be able to promise something that is is popular and will get support from his people. So to call for a war against Iran fits that purpose because he's getting, he is really in quite deep trouble politically. And one of the old standby, when you're stuck like that and, your problems are sort of folding in upon you, is to go to war. Let's go to war. And sort of it changes it. And of course, it's not as simple as that. And this is the whole thing that I wrote about, a piece on Substack about it, that, this is the new approach from Israel